Quick review that Darwin's first big idea is kind of deceptively simple, but very powerful. That the longer it's been since you had a common ancestor with another group, individual, group, species, clade, as we call big groups of species that belong together because they're related, the longer it's been since you had your common ancestor with that group, the more different you are genetically. And because those differences crop up in fairly predictable ways at a fairly predictable rate, we can now measure genetic difference, since we're so good at measuring DNA, and calculate how long it's been since they had that common ancestor. It works for humans, it works for my family, it works for bears, right? Brown bear and black bear, like my dad and my uncle, and then the giant panda, like my crazy clown cousin, right? You can tell, but you can tell not just by looking, but by DNA, and the DNA tells you the common ancestor was about that long ago. Any questions about that? Does that all kind of compute for you? So that's his first big idea. Darwin's second big idea you've learned before. We're going to learn it a little deeper now. And because it's what is it? You remember? What's the one like evolution concept you took with you from junior high?
Natural selection.
Natural selection. Natural selection, they kind of teach as synonymous with evolution, which is not true. Natural selection is one of the mechanisms that drives evolution, not remotely the only one. Darwin comes up with this one from observing something we've already talked about. I think for him it was cows that did it, believe it or not. But you can think of it as the same as we talked about with dogs. The power that comes with choosing the ones you want to breed, right? Selective breeding, the products of human selective breeding, which he called artificial selection. Basically, he looks at cows and goes, man, that is a far cry from whatever its ancestor was that lived in the wild. Look what humans have done just by picking the ones they like, building a fence, and only letting those ones breed. If that's that powerful, if just by picking the ones we like and letting them breed, we can make, a wolf into a chihuahua. We can make a wild cow into a domesticated cow. They're wild cows? There's not, right? Why don't I know do you know the ancestor of a cow? Because I don't.
Wouldn't it be like buffalo or something?
I don't know. I think we need to find out. Remind me. Anyway, if people can do that, he reasons, doesn't it just make sense that nature, that environment, that your surroundings are doing that all the time to wild populations, right? It's kind of the ultimate selective breeding. It's like, all right, it's super hot out all the time for 100 years. Who can survive that, right? Natural selection as opposed to artificial selection. So, natural selection as survival of the fittest, right? And that's a good description. We're going to go a little deeper than that. Let's talk about the requirements a population needs to fulfill in order to undergo natural selection. So, first thing, variation. Not just regular differences, though, but genetic differences. They got to be tied to genes. You got to have genetic variation. And of course, sexually reproducing populations have more diversity than asexually reproducing populations because of excellent crossing over and independent assortment. So genetic variation. Then there's the thing he learned. So he kind of learns this from Mendel. Darwin pulled from a lot of different people who came before him. This one he learned from an economist named Thomas Malthus, who basically studied like poverty conditions in England What he learned from Malthus was that not just humans, but pretty much all populations tend to over-reproduce. They tend to make more offspring. And of course, over-reproduction creates what relationship among offspring? We all need the same stuff, and not all of us are going to make it. That's competition. And so that's the third thing, right? So you just need genetic differences. You need over-reproduction leading to competition. And natural selection basically kicks in automatically. So those are the conditions. That's what makes a population undergo natural selection. And the effects of that, couple of layers here. Number one, the organisms that have the differences that are good, that help them survive, and that help them have more babies, more importantly, they're going to pass those good variations on to their kids. And their kids are going to have those good variations, most likely. That's kind of the, I call it the practical, on the ground, like visible thing that's happening, right? Like if you check in with that population, what you see is, oh, these died and these had a bunch of babies, and it's because these had a trait that didn't help them in this environment, and these had a trait that made them awesome in this environment, so these had more babies. But if you kind of zoom out and look at what's happening to the population over time, the evolution part is that what you're going to see is certain variations that are appropriate for that environment are going to start to get more common in the population. And the ones that aren't good for that environment, they're going to get less common. And that's what evolution is, right? Evolution is genetic change in a population over time. That's what's happening. This is one of the mechanisms that drives evolution. There's a bunch of others. This one's probably the easiest to understand. Something to really, really get into your brain, if it's not already, is this. You can't evolve. You can't. I can't either. I don't care what Pokemon says. Individuals don't evolve. Cool show, but they got a big misconception in the brains of millions and millions of kids. You can't just evolve, right? I can't just, oh, it's hot out, I got less hair. Doesn't work like that. Evolution happens between the generations. Evolution happens because some live and some die, and the ones that live have more babies and pass on their already existing traits to their offspring. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
In humans in like the last 100 years or something?
So many changes. But there's a lot of argument about what those changes really mean and what drove them. So like if you look at kind of the genetic level, the human genome in different areas of the world has been changing, but no one quite knows what to make of those changes. Yeah, that's about what I can tell you right now. Any other questions? Because what I want to do now, since artificial selection, as Darwin called it, or selective breeding, gives us so much insight into evolution, I want to watch a movie about dogs. And so you're going to watch a movie about dogs. It's a good movie. It's a little old, the old Nova episode, but it is terrific. The narrator, you'll recognize his voice. His name's John Lithgow. I'm interested in what you know him from, because I know a bunch of stuff he was in. But anyway, and I will, of course, ruin it with a word.